a lot of what we think about the world comes from films that we saw.
What the fuck?
Hey, hello.
Hey, Mr. Davison, Cassius Green here. Sorry to butt.
With a film, you get to bring them through your world.
I'd like to dedicate this imbibing of intoxicating elixirs. Here's to becoming a power caller.
You get to make them have life experiences that you want them to have. It's really powerful influence on people.
I should probably get back to work now.
Yeah, I can't pin it down to one, but definitely times of going to see movies and talking about it afterward, and you know, have it being a way to connect with people was something that really excited me as well. I think some of the influences, my artistic influences that affected this movie are, some of them are literary, like Toni Morrison and Salman Rushdie and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and not just for the magical realism that might be in some of them, but in the juicy detail and how everything is important. All these little things are important and layered, and they'll have descriptions of things that tell so much of the story and who that person is. And you know, so I think you know, like folks like those three authors they'll have, you know, there'll be someone who some writers, like even writers that I like, are very different than them. Like Dave Eggers, he will say something like, it was cold and he went to the store, right? Because what he's doing has to do with all of these other things. But somebody like Toni Morrison or Salman Rushdie, or they might write something like, he walked slowly to the store and in his left hand he held the coffee cup that 20 years before his grandmother had murdered his grandfather with. In that coffee cup was the coffee from the night before that he had declared he wouldn't put down until he finished. And all of those things, you know, a film producer often, especially an indie film producer, will be like, cut all that, just show them at the store. You don't need any of that stuff. But because you've left out all of these things, later on, somebody's gonna be like, have you heard about his grandmother? He murdered his grandfather, you know, something like that. Like there are all these things. And so I think a lot of those juicy details that just make things feel thick and syrupy, those really were ones that affected me. And, you know, some visual artists like Romare Bearden and Jacob Lawrence, things like that, you know, feel like a collage. I think that really influenced me. Parliament Funkadelic. I want for the world to be different. That passion drives my view of the world and drives my view of humanity and how people interact with each other. And so I want to, you know, I'm driven to put out, to communicate that view, you know, and to tell stories that tell that view. But it's also, it's done through, some of it is through like a thing of interpersonal relationships, the stuff that people, how people interact with each other in the context of all the stuff that's happening. So for instance, when we did Occupy Oakland, we did what we called a general strike, which really wasn't, but it was 50,000 people showed up. It's not a general strike. And we shut down the ports. It's a one-day thing, still only 50,000 people, whatever. But folks in Nigeria heard about it and started calling themselves Occupy Nigeria. And a month later, the government was trying to raise oil prices, which is really important. More important there than it is here, because they don't really have an electric grid, so many houses power themselves through oil, and usually it's subsidized by the government. They have a crazy economy in which there was no infrastructure built, so even though they have the oil there, it gets shipped out and processed somewhere else, then gets shipped back to them to where it's too expensive for anyone to have. So there's a government subsidy, the only form of welfare there is, which brings the price down. The government was taking away some of that subsidy, and it was almost doubling that. So the whole Occupy Nigeria, influenced by, they called themselves that because they were hyped off of what we did in Oakland, and they shut down all of Nigeria, every train station, every store, every airport, the oil producing thing, they were all shut down. And it went on for like 20 days. They eventually got sold out. And they won, but they didn't win. They didn't get it to where they wanted it to go to. And they were all meeting in the streets, like, so that people could see that it was happening. And so that was. It's not about trying to affect policy. It's about fighting, and doing local doesn't mean only something that affects you, but it means doing something where you are, because the world knows about it and duplicates those things too. Be passionate about something more than making art. If you're only passionate about making art, then you won't have a reason for doing it. You won't have a thing that's making your art good, because you'll be lost. You just want to make good art. And that's similar to someone just liking to talk, but having nothing that they're passionate about talking about. They just like to talk. They figure out the best words to use, the best cadences, all of these things. And there's someone that, those are people you don't want to listen to, right? And so have something that guides your art, because it also won't, just being in love with making art isn't going to end up being enough for you. And it's going to be hard. So you have to have some reason for doing it. I wish I was involved in a program like this. I think it's really important for people to be able to put the work, figure out the context that the work that they're going to make is in, and to see the victories and mistakes that other filmmakers have made, and to also have a more varied choice of films to pull from, to see what they like, and as opposed to just what's easily available. So I think it's really important for film in and of itself.